Today, Endu, will talk about my repatriation from Russia. Endu, who runs this channel, first visited Russia in the winter of 1996. It all started when I studied abroad in Moscow on a government-funded study abroad program from the Russian government. After that, I did not graduate from university, dropped out in 2000, returned to Japan, and got my first job at that time. After that, I changed jobs while working in Japan, and in Russia, I worked and lived in cities such as Sakhalin, Moscow, and Ulyanovsk. After that, while living in Japan in 2019, I decided to change jobs in Moscow as a local recruiter for a Japanese company and was able to move to Russia again. After that, I decided to live in Russia for almost 5 years from 2019 to 2024. In 2020, I was moving from Moscow to Volgograd, but again, I couldn't settle down and return to Japan. In Japan, this does not mean that the situation will remain unchanged for a long time, but rather that this is a preliminary stage for further migration. The next destination should be another country other than Russia. Well, that's how I withdrew from Russia. There were many reasons for my decision to leave Russia, and in fact, my private life had a big influence on it. I decided that there was no positive reason why we should meet. In a sense, making this decision regarding my relationship with my son has left me freer than ever before. This part of the private issue is quite sensitive, so I can only talk about this part in public places such as YouTube. Such was my life in Russia, but I ended up staying in this town of Volgograd for nearly 4 years. I was able to distance myself from Japan's mask hell for about 4 years, literally from the beginning of that incident in 2020, until this time when even Japan was completely brought under control. From that perspective, Russia's response to that incident in Volgograd was far more humane than Japan's. At the beginning of 2020, even in Volgograd, people were forced to wear it at supermarket cash registers, but it was quite rare to see people wearing it outside the building. During this period, I occasionally returned to Japan and traveled around the country giving lectures, but I get chills thinking about what it would have been like to live in that almost 100% wearable society for 2 or 3 years. It's so unpleasant. In that sense, I think I was really lucky to be able to live in a laid-back Volgograd during this period. However, as a result of the various personal relationships I mentioned earlier, I did not choose to continue living in Russia. One of the reasons for this, of course, is that I get bored easily and think it would be more interesting to live somewhere else. However, since I don't have any problems living in Russia, because I speak Russian, I think it would be a good idea to choose another Russian city to live in. But I didn't dare to do it. There are several complex factors that led me to give up on continuing my life in Russia. In Japan, due to the influence of myself and other influencers, and even more so due to the saviorism of President Putin, many people have a yearning for life in Russia, although it is a niche field. Some people in Japan have expectations that Russia is literally a paradise. To be fair, Russia is not a paradise. However, there are certainly some positive aspects that Japan does not have. And there are many things in which Japan is clearly better. I think the best way to know about this is to actually visit Russia and see it for yourself. So you decided to make up your mind and live permanently in Russia. If you are thinking that way, I recommend that such Japanese people visit Russia as a tourist once and check the situation. Now, the important point that made me decide to stop living in Russia was for very material and completely practical reasons. Let me tell you the point. There are 3. First, Russia currently cannot receive foreign remittances from almost all Western countries. Additionally, the Visa and MasterCard credit and debit cash advances that were previously available are no longer available. In other words, the only way to live in Russia is to either earn money locally in Russia and earn money in Russian rubles, or bring cash from Japan to Russia and use it for living expenses. This is very inconvenient. Second, even in Volgograd, Russia, prices are rising dramatically due to inflation. Third, and a very important point for online influencers, is that restrictions on Western social media are becoming stricter over time in Russia. These 3 points are very disadvantageous conditions for people like us who do business online like nomads and work without national borders. First of all, the first problem, the situation where you can't use any credit or debit cards from Japan or other Western countries, and you can't even receive remittances from abroad, is actually an outrageous situation. For people doing nomad work in a multinational country, their main bank should be the bank in their home country. You can work online even when you are abroad, and the proceeds will be deposited into banks in Japan and other countries in the West. Thanks to the network of card companies such as Visa and MasterCard, the deposited money can be used for card payments or withdrawn as cash in almost all countries. However, due to the current conflict with Ukraine, Russia is no longer able to accept Western cards. In that case, no matter how much income you earn online, there is no way to receive the money and you will be left with nothing to do. In this situation, what you need to do to receive the money is to leave Russia, withdraw cash in a country other than Russia, and bring that cash into Russia. Furthermore, in recent years, an increasing number of countries are no longer allowing cash withdrawals in dollars or euros at ATMs, and it is possible that you may only be able to withdraw money in the local currency. Moreover, even if you try to check such caching information online in advance, the current and accurate information is not necessarily updated, making it difficult to make a decision. The most reliable method is to withdraw Japanese yen in Japan and bring it to Russia. But this requires information skills to find an exchange office in Moscow, Russia that will exchange yen for rubles at a high exchange rate. At a minimum, you will need to have Russian language skills, and if you don't, it may be difficult to find such an exchange unless you have connections with people in Russia who are well informed. Furthermore, there are restrictions on the amount of money that can be brought into Russia from Japan, and if you exceed these limits, you will need to apply to the customs office in advance, which can be troublesome. You may be forced to stay behind, which can be a form of harassment. In fact, when I left for Russia, I was forced to do a detailed cash check at Japanese customs, and even had to follow me to an ATM at the airport to deposit the money I was trying to bring into my card. I don't know if Japanese customs is still taking such unusual measures, but it is true that there is a limit on the amount of cash that can be brought into Russia from Japan. If you are interested in traveling to Russia, I recommend that you research this point in advance, even if you are traveling for the purpose of traveling. So one of the important points that made me decide to leave Russia is that in order to receive money for living expenses in Russia, I need to leave Russia and bring in cash each time. The second point, the rise in prices, is quite significant. Prices have risen considerably on a Russian ruble basis, but in addition to this, the recent deterioration in the exchange rate between the yen and the ruble has also had an impact. As of 2020, I was overjoyed by the incredibly low rent in Volgograd. It was a so-called 1DK floor plan with a toilet, bath, and kitchen space, and it was located in the center of Volgograd, a city with 1 million people, so the monthly rent was about 20,000 yen. This figure of 20,000 yen includes utilities and electricity. When I checked with the real estate agent who came to see this property when I moved this time, I was told that the current market price, including utilities and electricity, was about 50,000 yen or more. Also, rents in Moscow are so high that they are incomparable to regional cities. But although I have not investigated the details this time, I have confirmed that rents have risen considerably compared to 2020 in Moscow. In Russia, the interest rate on fixed deposits has currently risen to a maximum of 21%, which is an abnormal situation that has increased by about 5% compared to 6 months ago. One of the reasons for these abnormal interest rates must be the expectation of a return on investment, and real estate investment is thought to play a central role in this investment. It seems that in Russia, it is currently becoming difficult to purchase real estate for living purposes other than for investment purposes, and as a result, many people are renting out apartments. Anyway, one of the advantages of living in Volgograd, Russia's countryside, was the low prices. But the current situation is that this advantage of low prices has diminished considerably. I have the impression that the rent and prices in Moscow are not that different from those in Japan. Another crucial issue for online business nomad workers is Russia's tightened censorship of Western social media. To begin with, in Russia, Twitter, Facebook, etc. were censored, meaning they could not be used without a VPN, a technology that required access to a server from a foreign country. Recently, this censorship situation has been tightening year by year, and by 2024, it will be virtually impossible to use Facebook even with a VPN. Therefore, during the summer when I returned to Russia from Japan in 2024, I was almost unable to update Facebook. Until recently, it was possible to watch YouTube without a VPN. But since this summer, it has become almost impossible to watch without a VPN, making it even more difficult for Russian YouTubers to engage in public speaking activities on YouTube. Also, even for foreign YouTubers like me, whose viewers are mostly Japanese, I feel that access is gradually becoming unstable, and I am worried about continuing my activities in Russia. In my case, if I were unable to upload videos to YouTube, I would be in a dangerous situation where my income would suddenly disappear. In this way, from my position as a nomad worker, I felt that the benefits of living in Russia were disappearing due to these three reasons. The three reasons are that in Russia, it is not possible to receive cash from the West or use Western cards. Prices in Russia have risen considerably, including in the countryside, and the Western SNSs are becoming not available to use. All of these points can be decisive for those who are currently thinking of moving to Russia. I would also like to add that even if you are a Japanese person who cannot speak Russian and suddenly want to move to Russia and earn income from a company located in Russia, it is almost impossible. Those who can emigrate are limited to those who have a certain amount of savings and can live without working, and those who are online nomad workers who can travel between Russia and other countries to receive money. Furthermore, even if you can meet these conditions, when considering moving to Russia, it is essential to actually enter Russia and investigate the local situation before making a decision. Russia is a country that is difficult for Japanese people to travel to, and even for short-term stays, it is necessary to obtain a visa. In this regard, the situation has recently improved, and for short-term stays such as travel, there is a system called e-visa, which allows you to apply for a visa online and use that e-visa to travel to Russia. However, in order to enter Russia, all airlines, including JAL, ANA, Aeroflot, and S7, have canceled direct flights from Japan, so you need to buy a ticket on a Chinese airline via Beijing or Shanghai. It is now common for people to enter the country. Also, there are no direct flights from the so-called Western countries other than Japan. I think it would be quite difficult to live in Russia without knowledge of Russian. My feeling is that it is quite rare for a foreigner living in Russia to not be able to speak Russian. However, for short-term stays, such as sightseeing trips, I think it is possible to explore Russia without knowledge of Russian. These days, you can also use translation and interpretation apps using your smartphone. Therefore, if there are people who are watching this channel who really want to abandon Japan and move to Russia, instead of holding on to that desire for years, I would recommend getting an e-visa and moving to Russia via China. I think it would be better to enter Russia, take a sightseeing trip to Moscow or Petersburg, and judge for yourself what Russia's like. Of course, Russia is not a paradise, and there are many ordinary people who are living in a much more difficult place than in Japan. Moreover, prices are rising at a considerable pace, and the Japanese yen has weakened in terms of exchange rates, making it no longer felt like a good deal in terms of prices. And in the first place, is Russia a country that is kinder to ordinary citizens than Japan? People in Japan have no idea how much ordinary Russians and business Russians don't trust their government. People in Japan have no idea how dissatisfied ordinary Russians are with their living conditions. Aside from Moscow, the reason why the roads in regional cities such as Volgograd and other regional cities are in such dilapidated condition is not that the budget for public works is insufficient, but that the state of corruption and cutouts in public works. Many Russians understand that this is far more pathological. However, over the past few years, the state of road maintenance seems to have improved considerably compared to before. Also, unlike in Japan, Russian people may understand why the roadsides in rural Volgograd are littered with garbage week after week, but I still don't understand it. This was more than 10 years ago, but the beaches of Sakhalin, where many people gather, were littered with garbage, just like garbage dumps, but I don't really know what happened to them now. About 15 years ago in Moscow, it happened that as soon as tulips were planted on the road near a house, all the tulip plants were stolen and pulled out by nearby residents. On the anti-Putin channel that I previously translated and reported on this channel, there was a video that made fun of the fact that in a Russian regional city, ridiculously bulky garbage has been left in the courtyards of apartment complexes for many years. Why is this so obvious? I'm not Russian myself, so I don't really understand. However, what I can say clearly is that Russia is not the ideal country that Japanese people hope to be as a paradise. But Russia has a lot of good things. This movement of thoroughly researching alternative history, our true history, centered around the mud flood, and pursuing it on the strength of individuals is unique to Russia. As far as I know, ordinary Russians are very good and kind people. It is rare for someone to deceive someone just because they are a foreigner. However, just like in Japan, there are people in Russia who are powerful and greedy, who are willing to commit corruption or deceive others. In both Japan and Russia, the environments in those countries are mostly created by greedy and cruel aristocratic rich people, bureaucrats, politicians, and other powerful people. In the environment created by these rich aristocrats, we ordinary people are exploited while experiencing inconvenience and terrible feelings. The situation is the same in Japan and Russia. In Russia, too, the country is shaped by the greedy, cruel, aristocratic rich. Is it really possible to create a paradise in a country with such an exploitative system? If you think about it for a moment, the answer is obvious. But Russia is still a paradise. So if you are thinking of moving there for the rest of your life, you should get an e-visa as soon as possible and enjoy sightseeing and free travel to Moscow, Petersburg, etc. Please visit it on your trip. It is true that Russia is a wonderful, beautiful, and good country and town, but if you have the right observational perspective to read the situation, you should be able to see the true nature of Russia. For that reason, I have decided to withdraw from my stay in Russia this time. I must live in Japan at least until the end of the year and only attend the salon, but we also hold offline meetings. We are an online salon with very strict membership criteria, but we are looking forward to meeting everyone.
時を越える海風潮とむくろの波今私の間をすり抜けては嘆くうつろな瞳並ぶ鉄格子の国傲慢と裏切りを諦めで潰した愛と綺麗に飾ってどれだけの命詰めばやがて気づくのでしょうか血みどろの叫びすらも檻の向こうに隠して砕いてちぎって罪深き人の闇果て知らぬ欲は自己矛盾の声さえ雑音と捉える冷酷な作業のようにどれだけの涙飲めば世界は変わるのでしょうかほんのひとさじだけの甘さにいつまでも勝てない従うばかりで心の安寧と言い訳 し